The security guard's baton slammed against the hood of Thomas Webb's car. Metal echoed across the parking garage. "You can't park here. Employee parking only." Thomas sat behind the wheel of a 15-year-old Toyota Camry. Rust on the fenders, crack across the windshield. Around them, the underground garage gleamed with BMWs and Mercedes. The guard hit the hood again. "I said move it, now." Thomas didn't start the engine. His daughter's wedding was happening upstairs. Right now. He had driven 11 hours from Austin. No sleep, no stops, except for gas. The guard's radio crackled. "We got a situation in P3. If you love watching the invisible become impossible to ignore, you're in the right place. Subscribe for more." Hidden Billionaire stories. Thomas finally looked up. His eyes were bloodshot. 3 days of stubble on his face. The guard leaned down to the window. "Sir, I won't ask again. This is reserved parking for Whitney Hotel executives." Thomas reached for his phone. Pulled up the wedding invitation his daughter had sent. Digital, no physical card, just a text with details. "My daughter is getting married upstairs. Rebecca Webb, Ballroom C." The guard straightened, spoke into his radio. "Check the guest list for Ballroom C, Rebecca Webb's event." 14 hours earlier, Thomas had been standing on a roof in downtown Austin. Not sightseeing, working. He owned the building. Owned 43 others in Texas. But nobody knew that. He was checking the HVAC system personally. The maintenance supervisor had reported issues. Thomas didn't trust secondhand information. He climbed the ladder himself, checked the compressor, found the problem. A loose belt. Simple. He fixed it with tools from his truck. His phone rang while he was tightening the final bolt. Rebecca, his daughter. He almost didn't answer. They hadn't spoken in 6 months. "Dad?" Her voice was small, uncertain. "I know this is last minute. I know we haven't. I'm getting married tomorrow in Chicago at the Whitney Hotel." Thomas climbed down the ladder, wiped his hands on his jeans. "Tomorrow? Rebecca, I didn't even know you were engaged." Silence on the line. Then, it happened fast. Connor's family wanted a small wedding, immediate family only. His parents are hosting. Thomas felt something tighten in his chest. "You want me there?" Another pause. "Only if you can make it. I know it's far. I know you're busy with whatever you do." Thomas had raised Rebecca alone. Her mother left when she was 4. Just disappeared one Tuesday. Left a note on the kitchen table. Thomas was 28. Working as a parking attendant at a hospital. Minimum wage, no degree, no prospects. He worked double shifts, slept in his car between jobs. Rebecca stayed with neighbors. Sometimes didn't see her father for 2 days straight. When she was 8, Thomas bought his first property. A small parking lot near the university. Paid cash he'd saved for 3 years. Operated it himself. Collected fees. Maintained the pavement. Made more in a month than 6 months of hospital work. He bought another lot. Then another. Austin was growing, university expanding, downtown developing. Parking was gold. Thomas understood something others didn't. People always needed somewhere to put their cars. He bought lots near hospitals, near stadiums, near convention centers, nothing fancy, just asphalt and paint and collection boxes. He reinvested everything, never hired management, did it all himself. By the time Rebecca was in high school, he owned 23 parking facilities. Revenue crossed $8 million annually. They still lived in a 2-bedroom apartment. Rebecca never asked why. Thomas never explained. She went to college at Northwestern, Chicago, far from Austin, far from him. Thomas paid tuition in cash. The bursar's office flagged it as unusual. Thomas didn't care. Rebecca majored in finance, made friends with wealthy classmates, started spending holidays with their families instead of coming home. Thomas noticed, didn't comment. She graduated and got a job at an investment firm. Her social media showed a different life. Rooftop parties, yacht clubs, restaurants Thomas couldn't pronounce. She called less, then stopped calling. Thomas kept working, kept buying properties, Chicago, Dallas, Houston, Phoenix. His portfolio expanded, his wealth compounded. Rebecca never asked about it. Thomas made the drive in his Camry. He could have flown, could have hired a car service, could have done 1,000 things differently. But he drove. Same car he'd had for 16 years. Same car Rebecca used to be embarrassed to be seen in during high school. He left Austin at 9 p.m., drove through the night. Stopped once in Oklahoma for gas and coffee. The attendant looked at his car with pity. Thomas paid cash, kept driving. His back ached. His eyes burned. He thought about turning around. Rebecca had said, "Only if you can make it. Not please come, not I need you there." Just conditional, passive. He kept driving anyway. He hit Chicago at 7 a.m. The wedding was at 2 p.m. He found a motel off the highway. $29 a night. The clerk asked if he wanted a room for the week. Thomas said just one night. He showered. The water was lukewarm. He tried to shave, but his hand shook from exhaustion. He gave up after 3 strokes, lay down on the bed, stared at the ceiling. Water stains shaped like continents. Set an alarm for noon, closed his eyes, didn't sleep. Just listened to trucks on the highway and thought about Rebecca's voice on the phone. How distant it had sounded. How formal. At 12:30, Thomas got back in his car and drove to the Whitney Hotel. It took 40 minutes to find parking. Street parking was full. Paid lots were full. He finally found the hotel's underground garage. A sign said, "Hotel guests and executives only." Thomas pulled in anyway. Found a spot between a Porsche and a Tesla. His Camry looked like a mistake. He sat there for 10 minutes checking his phone. Rebecca hadn't texted, hadn't confirmed he was coming. He could leave, drive back to Austin. She'd understand. Maybe even prefer it. He opened the door and got out. The security guard appeared within 30 seconds. Young, athletic, hand already on his radio. "Sir, you can't park here?" Thomas closed his door. "I'm attending a wedding upstairs." The guard looked at the Camry, looked at Thomas's jeans and wrinkled button-down shirt. "This is executive parking. Guest parking is 2 blocks north." Thomas's jaw tightened. "I just drove 11 hours. I'm not parking 2 blocks away." The guard stepped closer. "Then you're not parking at all." That's when he hit the hood with his baton. The sound brought 2 more guards and a woman in a manager's suit. The manager's name tag said Jessica Chen, Operations Director. She assessed the situation with cold efficiency. "What's the problem?" the guard explained. Jessica looked at Thomas. Her expression was professionally neutral, but her eyes held judgment. "Sir, we have policies for a reason. This garage is for hotel executives and platinum members only. I'm going to have to ask you to move your vehicle." Thomas pulled out his phone again, showed the invitation. "My daughter, Rebecca Webb. I'm her father." Jessica glanced at the screen. Something shifted in her face. Rebecca Webb? She stepped away, made a phone call. Thomas couldn't hear the conversation, but he saw her body language change. Stiff, uncomfortable. She returned. Mr. Webb, I've spoken with the wedding coordinator. The seating chart shows father of the bride is not attending. Thomas felt the words like a physical blow. I'm here now. Jessica's professionalism cracked slightly. I understand, but the family has specifically requested that the parking garage remain clear of. They've requested enhanced security for the event. I'm sure you understand. Thomas understood perfectly. Rebecca hadn't wanted him here, had hoped he wouldn't come. He could have told them. Could have pulled up the property records on his phone, shown them that he owned this building, owned the land it sat on, owned the parking garage they were trying to kick him out of. He'd bought the Whitney Hotel 3 years ago, anonymous purchase through shell companies. It was one of 47 hotels in his portfolio. Revenue from this property alone was $18 million annually. Jessica Chen worked for him. The guards worked for him. Every person in that ballroom upstairs worked for him. They just didn't know it. Thomas said nothing. Started his engine, drove out. He parked on the street 3 blocks away, fed the meter with quarters, walked back to the hotel. His legs felt heavy. The exhaustion was catching up. He entered through the main lobby. Marble floors, gold fixtures, a fountain in the center with koi fish. Thomas had approved every renovation, every detail. Never set foot inside until now. The lobby bar was already full. Wedding guests having pre-ceremony drinks, women in designer dresses, men in tailored suits. Thomas walked past them. No one looked at him. He found the ballroom level. Signs directed him to Ballroom C. Outside the ballroom, a coordinator checked names against a list. Thomas approached. Thomas Webb. The coordinator scrolled again. I'm sorry, I don't see that name. Thomas's voice stayed level. Father of the bride? The coordinator's eyes widened slightly. She stepped away, whispered into a radio. A moment later, a man appeared. Tall, perfect posture, expensive suit that fit like sculpture. He extended his hand. Mr. Webb, I'm Connor's father, Richard Ashworth. Thomas shook his hand. Richard's grip was firm, aggressive. I'm afraid there's been some confusion about the guest list. Rebecca appeared behind her future father-in-law. She wore a pre-wedding dress, cream-colored, simple but elegant. Her makeup was flawless, but her eyes were panicked. Dad, you came. Thomas wanted to hug her, wanted to tell her she looked beautiful, wanted to ask why she hadn't put him on the guest list. He did none of those things, just nodded. You invited me? Richard's hand landed on Rebecca's shoulder. Possessive. Darling, why don't you go finish getting ready? I'll handle this. Rebecca looked between them. Dad, maybe we could talk after. Richard cut her off. The photographer is waiting, go? If you're hooked on watching Pride destroy everything it touches, hit subscribe. We're loaded with hidden billionaire stories. Rebecca left. Thomas watched her go. Richard's smile never reached his eyes. Mr. Webb, let me be direct. This is a very small, very intimate wedding. Connor and Rebecca wanted immediate family only. I'm sure you understand. Thomas understood. He wasn't considered immediate family, not anymore. Richard continued. We've arranged a lovely reception for extended family and friends next month in Napa. You'll receive an invitation. Thomas's hands curled into fists, uncurled. I drove 11 hours to be here. Richard's smile thinned. And that's very dedicated, but surely you can see this isn't appropriate. A woman joined them, Richard's wife. She had Rebecca's eyes, or Rebecca had hers. Richard, what's happening? Richard didn't look away from Thomas. Mr. Webb was just leaving. The woman, Catherine, looked Thomas over. His wrinkled shirt, his jeans, his unshaven face. Her nose wrinkled slightly. Oh, I see. She didn't say anything else, didn't need to. Thomas had been dismissed, categorized, found wanting. He thought about his daughter getting ready somewhere in this building. Thought about walking her down the aisle. Thought about the speech he'd prepared in his head during the 11-hour drive. None of it would happen. Thomas turned and walked away. Behind him, he heard Catherine whisper to Richard, "Not quiet enough. She said he wouldn't come. She was so worried." Richard's response was lower, but Thomas caught it anyway. "It's handled." Thomas walked through the lobby, past the guests, past the fountain, past the doorman who held the door without seeing him. Outside, Chicago was cold. November wind cut through his shirt. He walked the 3 blocks to his car. The meter had expired. A ticket fluttered under the wiper. $35. Thomas pulled it free and got in his car. He didn't drive away. He sat there, engine off, watching people walk past, couples, families, a man carrying flowers. Thomas pulled out his phone, called his assistant, his only employee who knew everything. Her name was Marie. She'd worked for him for 12 years. "Mr. Webb, is everything all right?" Thomas's voice came out rougher than intended. "I need you to pull the management contracts for the Whitney Hotel Chicago." Marie's keyboard clicked. "The Whitney, sir, that's one of our properties." He sat there, engine off, watching people walk past, couples, families, a man carrying flowers. Thomas pulled out his phone, called his assistant, his only employee who knew everything. Her name was Marie. She'd worked for him for 12 years. "Mr. Webb, is everything all right?" Thomas's voice came out rougher than intended. "I need you to pull the management contracts for the Whitney Hotel Chicago." Marie's keyboard clicked. "The Whitney, sir, that's one of our properties." Thomas closed his eyes. "I know I need the contracts tonight, and I need the board packet for Ashworth Capital Management." Marie found everything in 30 minutes. Thomas sat in his car and read. The Whitney Hotel was managed by Prestige Hospitality Group. Contract up for renewal in 6 months. Ashworth Capital Management was a private equity firm. Mid-sized. Richard Ashworth was founder and managing partner. Assets under management, $8 billion. The firm specialized in commercial real estate and hospitality investments. Thomas scrolled through their portfolio. Office buildings, retail centers, 3 hotels. The Whitney wasn't one of them. But Ashworth Capital leased office space in a building Thomas owned in Dallas. 14th floor. Lease term, 7 years, 4 years remaining. Thomas made calls, first to his attorney, then to his property managers in Dallas, Houston, and Phoenix, then to the CEO of Prestige Hospitality Group. Each conversation was brief, specific. By 6 p.m., he had a plan. By 8 p.m., he had contracts drafted. The wedding was over. Thomas hadn't gone back, hadn't tried to sneak in, just sat in his car and worked. His phone buzzed once. A photo from Rebecca, her and Connor, married. She was smiling. The caption, Wish you could have been here. Thomas stared at the message, didn't reply. Put his phone away and kept working. He drove back to Austin that night. 11 hours in reverse, stopped at the same gas station in Oklahoma, same attendant. The guy recognized him. Back already? That was quick. Thomas filled his tank, bought coffee, drove. He thought about Rebecca growing up, thought about the parking lots, the late nights, the choices he'd made. Work instead of school plays, expansion instead of vacations, wealth instead of presents. He'd given her everything financially, given her nothing that mattered. By the time he pulled into Austin, the sun was rising. He went straight to his office. A small room above a parking garage on 6th Street. Started making more calls. Richard Ashworth's week started badly. Monday morning, his office manager informed him that the Dallas lease was being terminated. Terminated? We have 4 years left. The manager showed him the paperwork. Thomas Webb Properties, LLC was invoking a clause for property redevelopment. 60 days to vacate. Richard called his lawyer. The lawyer read the clause. It's enforceable. They're within their rights. Richard threw the papers across his desk. Find us new space, immediately. The manager hesitated. Sir, we have 90 employees in that office. Finding equivalent space with 60 days' notice. The costs will be significant. Tuesday brought worse news. Ashworth Capital's largest client was pulling their investment. $200 million in assets under management. Gone. The client's representative was apologetic but firm. We're restructuring our portfolio, nothing personal. Richard knew it was personal. Everything in business was personal. He spent the day calling other clients, assuring them, stabilizing. By Wednesday, 2 more clients had pulled funds, smaller amounts, $5 million here, $10 million there. But the trend was clear. Someone was whispering in ears, planting doubt. Richard called his investigator. Find out who's doing this. The investigator came back Friday with the name Thomas Webb. Richard stared at the report. Thomas Webb owned 47 hotels, 132 parking facilities, 63 commercial properties. Net worth estimated at $12 billion. The investigator had included a photo. Richard's stomach dropped. The man from the wedding, the one in jeans, the one he'd dismissed. Catherine walked into his office with wedding photos. These turned out beautifully. We should send some to Rebecca's father. What was his name again? Richard couldn't speak. Just pushed the investigator's report across the desk. Catherine read. Her face went white. Richard tried to call Thomas, got Marie instead. I need to speak with Mr. Webb. Marie's voice was pleasant, professional, immovable. Mr. Webb is unavailable? Richard explained who he was. I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding. We can resolve this. Marie's tone didn't change. Mr. Webb is aware of who you are? He remains unavailable? Richard sent emails, sent letters, tried to reach Thomas through business contacts. Every attempt hit the same wall. Polite, professional, absolute. By the end of the month, Ashworth Capital had lost 20% of its assets under management. The Dallas office closure cost $3 million to execute. Moving costs, lease breaking fees, lost productivity. The new space was smaller, more expensive, employees grumbled. 3 senior analysts quit. Richard's board called an emergency meeting. They'd seen the financial statements, seen the client exodus. The board chair was direct. Richard, what's happening? Richard told them about Thomas Webb, about the wedding, about the mistake. The board chair leaned back. You threw out a $12 billion real estate mogul because he wore jeans to his own daughter's wedding? Richard had no answer. Rebecca called her father. First time since the wedding. Dad, did you do something to Connor's father? Thomas was inspecting a parking garage in Houston, checking the payment kiosks personally. I don't know what you mean. Rebecca's voice cracked. His business is falling apart. He says it's because of you. Thomas tapped a kiosk screen. It flickered. He made a note to replace it. Rebecca, I own properties. Sometimes leases end. Sometimes businesses change. That's not personal. Rebecca was crying now. But the timing, Thomas cut her off. I need to go. This kiosk needs repair. He hung up. Felt nothing. Just distance. Connor's parents pushed for an annulment, not divorce. Annulment. Like the marriage never happened. Connor resisted at first. Then the pressure mounted. His father's business was failing. The family needed to cut ties with anything associated with Thomas Webb. That included Rebecca. Connor filed papers 4 months after the wedding. Rebecca called Thomas. He didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Dad, my marriage is ending. Connor says his family can't be associated with us, with you. I don't understand what happened. Please call me. Thomas listened to the message 3 times. Saved it, never called back. Ashworth Capital Management collapsed over 18 months. Clients continued leaving. The firm's reputation had been damaged beyond repair. Not by anything obvious. Just whispers, doubts, opportunities that dried up. Richard tried everything, restructured fees, brought in new partners. Nothing worked. The firm filed for bankruptcy protection. Richard's personal assets were seized to cover debts. The house in Evanston, the vacation home in Aspen, the art collection. Catherine filed for divorce. Took what was left. Richard ended up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Naperville, working as a consultant, making $70,000 a year. Connor bounced between jobs. His father's reputation was poison. The family name meant nothing now. He tried finance, tried real estate, tried consulting. Each position lasted a few months before something went wrong. A deal would fall through, a client would leave. Always something. Connor never connected the dots. Never realized that Thomas Webb's network was vast and his memory was long. After 2 years, Connor left Chicago, moved to Portland, started over with a new name, his mother's maiden name, tried to forget he'd ever been an Ashworth. Rebecca struggled too. The annulment left her with nothing. Connor's lawyers had been thorough. She'd signed a prenup without reading it carefully. Too in love to care. Now she was alone. Her friends from the investment firm stopped calling. She'd become associated with failure, with scandal, with a family that had fallen. She quit her job. Couldn't stand the whispers, the looks. Started freelancing, financial consulting for small businesses. Made enough to cover rent on a studio apartment. She thought about calling her father every day. Never did. Pride, shame, fear. All of it stopped her. Thomas continued working. His portfolio expanded. He bought properties in Seattle, Portland, Denver. Always parking lots and garages. Always hotels and commercial buildings. Nothing flashy. Nothing that drew attention. His net worth crossed $15 billion. Forbes tried to interview him. He declined. Wall Street Journal tried. Declined. He remained invisible. His employees knew him as the guy who checked kiosks and fixed HVAC systems, the guy who drove an old Camry. Nobody connected him to the holdings, to the wealth. He liked it that way. Control without visibility. Power without performance. 5 years after the wedding, Thomas received a letter, handwritten, from Rebecca. He almost didn't open it. Sat with it on his desk for 3 days. Finally opened it on a Thursday. She'd written about her life, the annulment, the job losses, the apartment, the struggle. She didn't ask for money, didn't ask for help, just wrote, explained, apologized. The last line. I understand now why you lived the way you did. Why you never needed people to see you. I'm sorry I was embarrassed. I'm sorry I cared more about what Connor's family thought than what you sacrificed. Thomas read it twice. Put it in a drawer. Didn't respond. But he made a call to a friend who ran a consulting firm in Chicago. I need you to hire someone. Rebecca Webb, she does financial consulting, freelance. The friend hesitated. Thomas, I looked into her. The Ashworth situation, it's complicated. Hiring her might... Thomas cut him off. Hire her full-time, market rate plus 20%. Don't tell her I sent you. The friend agreed. Rebecca got the call a week later. A good position. Stable, she took it. Never knew her father had made it happen. Thomas preferred it that way. Help without credit, support without strings. Rebecca rebuilt slowly. The consulting job was good, challenging. She was talented, always had been, just needed a chance. After 2 years, she was promoted. After 4, she was made partner. She started dating again, carefully. A teacher she met at a coffee shop. No family money, no connections, just a good person who liked her for her. They got married in a small ceremony, City Hall, 20 guests. Rebecca sent her father an invitation. He didn't respond. She wasn't surprised. On the wedding day, an envelope arrived. Cash, $50,000. A note. For building something that matters. Rebecca cried for an hour. Thomas turned 65. His company had grown to encompass properties in 38 states. 247 hotels, 416 parking facilities, 312 commercial buildings. Revenue exceeded $2 billion annually. He still drove his Camry, still lived in a modest apartment, still worked personally on maintenance issues. His only indulgence was donating anonymously, hundreds of millions to schools, hospitals, scholarship funds. Nobody knew the money came from him. Nobody needed to know. The work mattered, not the recognition. One afternoon, Thomas was checking a parking garage in Chicago. Not the Whitney, a different property, smaller. He was examining a gate that kept malfunctioning. A woman walked up. "Excuse me, do you work here?" Thomas looked up. Didn't recognize her at first, then did. Catherine Ashworth. She'd aged badly, stress written in lines around her eyes. She didn't recognize him. "The gate ate my ticket. Can you help?" Thomas stood, wiped his hands on his pants, walked to the booth, overrode the system. The gate opened. Catherine thanked him, handed him $5. "For your trouble." Thomas took it. She drove away. Never knew. Rebecca had a daughter. Named her Diana, after Thomas's mother. She sent him a photo, a text. "You're a grandfather." Thomas looked at the photo for a long time. A baby, Rebecca's eyes. He saved it to his phone, put the phone down, went back to work. That night he transferred $5 million to a trust in Diana's name, structured it to become available when she turned 25. Enough to start a business, buy a home, build something. He didn't tell Rebecca. She'd find out eventually. or not. Either way, the money would be there, waiting. That's what mattered. Richard Ashworth saw Thomas once more, by accident. Richard was working as a consultant for a real estate firm, low level, analyzing properties for potential clients. One assignment was a parking garage in downtown Chicago. He arrived to find a man in coveralls checking payment kiosks. Richard walked past him without a glance. Inside the management office, he asked about the owner. The manager pulled up records. Thomas Webb Properties, LLC. They're the biggest private parking operator in the country. Richard's chest tightened. He walked back outside. The man in coveralls was still there. Richard looked closer, recognized him. Thomas looked up. Their eyes met. Richard opened his mouth. Thomas turned back to his work. Richard stood there for a full minute, then left. Never mentioned it to anyone. Thomas worked until he couldn't anymore. At 72, his back finally gave out. 3 herniated discs. Surgery required. He hired a management company for the first time, professionals to handle daily operations. He hated it. Hated not being on the ground, not seeing the properties, not fixing things himself. But his body had limits, his will didn't. He moved to a small house outside Austin. 1 story, simple. Rebecca visited once a month. Brought Diana. The little girl called him Papa. Thomas taught her about buildings, about maintenance, about the difference between owning things and needing things. She listened, really listened, reminded him of himself. At 75, Thomas sold half his portfolio. $15 billion deal. Private equity consortium. They wanted his name attached, wanted him to stay on as advisor. He refused, took the money and walked away, gave most of it to charity, anonymously, set up trusts for Rebecca and Diana, made sure they'd never need anything, but structured it so they couldn't access the full amounts until they built something themselves, earned something. He didn't want his wealth to destroy their drive, didn't want them to become what the Ashworths had been, people who confused money with worth, position with character. Rebecca finally understood everything, not from Thomas. He never explained. But from living, from building her consulting firm into something successful, from raising Diana on her own values instead of borrowed ones, from learning that invisibility was freedom and recognition was a cage. One evening she visited Thomas at his house. Diana was at school, just the 2 of them. "Dad, I need to tell you something." Thomas was reading, looked up. Rebecca's eyes were wet. "Thank you for the wedding, for leaving, for everything that happened after. I didn't understand then, but I do now. You gave me the greatest gift anyone could give." Thomas closed his book. "What's that?" Rebecca smiled. "You let me fail, and then you let me build myself back up without interference, without rescue, just space to become someone real." Thomas nodded, didn't say anything, didn't need to. She understood finally, completely. Thomas Webb died at 79, heart attack, quick. He was inspecting a property in Austin when it happened, one of the few he'd kept. His estate was worth $23 billion, most of it already committed to charitable trusts. Rebecca and Diana were provided for, but not excessively. Enough to be comfortable, not enough to be careless. The funeral was small. 20 people, no press, no publicity. Workers from his properties came. People who'd known him as the guy who fixed things, who checked kiosks, who drove an old Camry. They shared stories about his kindness, his work ethic, his absolute refusal to be treated as anything special. Rebecca stood at the front. looked at all these people who'd known her father, really known him, in ways she'd spent years failing to. She understood now, completely. And it broke her heart that understanding had come too late to tell him. But maybe he'd known. Maybe that was enough. If this story made you feel something real, subscribe right now for more Hidden Billionaire stories, because the most powerful people are the ones nobody sees coming.